Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching India Today Global. A big geopolitical development has taken place in Venezuela. US has carried out a surgical precision strike and in fact extracted President Nicolas Maduro from Venezuelan capital Caracas. What are the implications of this development? Is US going to install a new government in Venezuela? Will there be boots on ground? Will there be another war initiated by President Donald Trump? All these questions are there. And to discuss this issue, I am being joined by senior journalist Sandeep Unnithan. Welcome to India Today Global, Sandeep. And what a
Thanks,
start for
Pranay.
2026.
Absolutely, Pranay. And we were all in the morning, we were all looking towards Iran. We thought there's going to be a regime change
Yes.
there, and lo and behold,
Hmm.
halfway across the world, these events unfold
Hmm.
in Caracas, Venezuela.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And but did you see it coming, Sandeep? Because there was a military buildup in last 3-4 months. If you see September
Yes.
2025 onwards, there is a buildup. President Donald Trump was giving ample indication that he is looking at Nicolas Maduro as an illegitimate government. He said in as many words that the government in Venezuela is untenable. Nicolas Maduro's regime is untenable, and we cannot accept that. And he also used the word regime change. So he
Absolutely.
gave ample indications.
Well, Pranay, it was, with Venezuela, it was never a question of when. It
Hmm,
was only
hmm,
not a question of if, but it's a question
hmm,
of when. And
hmm,
as far back as September of
hmm,
2025, I've been saying that, it was a regime
hmm,
change, a military operation to remove Maduro was inevitable in Venezuela. And you've seen the slow buildup of forces
hmm,
in the Caribbean. You've seen a carrier strike group, amphibious assault ships. We've been covering it here on
hmm,
the Global
hmm,
for several months now.
hmm,
And the rhetoric that President Trump had been using the last couple of days, that kind of indicated that military action against Venezuela was imminent.
hmm,
And we even kind of, war game the kind of potential scenarios. There were three scenarios
hmm,
we were looking at. One is, of course, covert action, which
hmm,
Trump had authorized. The second is, of course, a surgical strike
hmm,
using special forces. And the third, of course, is a full-scale military intervention with boots on the ground.
hmm,
Now,
hmm,
it appears that what we've seen in the last couple of hours unfold in Caracas is a combination of the first and the second scenarios, which is
hmm,
the use of special forces and a surgical strike, covert action, and the fact that you captured President Maduro and his wife and you've flown them back to the United States. And very interestingly, Pranay, the visuals that are
hmm,
coming out there, which are released by the United States, show Maduro in the being captured by the
hmm,
DEA, the Drug
hmm,
Enforcement Agency, and not
hmm,
US military personnel. So that is
hmm,
very important signaling. The fact is
hmm,
that we wondered whether Trump had the authority to go
hmm,
and launch a military attack against Venezuela without going to Congress. Now, he didn't go to
hmm.
Congress, but he
Yes.
obviously looked for those
Hmm,
options short of a full-scale
hmm,
war. This is actually President Trump's special military operation, right?
hmm,
Kind that President Vladimir Putin has used in Russia for the
hmm,
war in Ukraine, which is entering its fifth year next month. This
hmm,
is a special military operation that Trump has used
hmm.
under the guise of an
And
anti-drug and
coincidentally, Sandeep,
anti-narcotics
this
operation.
has happened exactly after 35 years of the regime change in Panama. You know.
Absolutely. And Pranay, the only
Hmm,
doubt in my mind in
hmm,
September of last year was what are they going to call this operation? Now,
hmm,
Panama, as you pointed out, was Operation Just Cause, which
hmm,
President George Bush Sr. launched in 1989 December to
hmm,
capture the Panamanian dictator Noriega, and
hmm,
he was captured by, I think, on the first week of January. Very
hmm,
similar timeline. But the
hmm,
fact is that Panama is, of course, a much smaller country. It's a tiny country
hmm,
compared to Venezuela. Venezuela is a massive country. It's almost 1 million square kilometers. It has one of the world's largest proven oil reserves. That's $303 billion,
hmm,
303 billion barrels of oil, which is why I thought I was joking with someone saying that this operation should be called Operation 303.
hmm,
It's going to be couched in this garb of restoring democracy and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's all pure and simple. It's a grab for Venezuela's oil. And this is a
hmm,
grab that Trump has made. And this is a big
hmm,
thing. If they can actually pull off this, Is
In fact, I recall
exactly
our conversation, Sandeep,
yes.
about Iran, about Venezuela, about the drill baby drill rhetoric to these military action, how President Donald Trump is playing the oil politics here.
Absolutely. There are
Mm,
multiple
mm,
readings into this, Pranay. One is, of course, you said this
mm,
thing of the
mm,
return of oil politics. The fact is that
mm,
he has basically thrown this entire thing of renewables into the dustbin.
mm,
And he said, we
mm,
are going to go oil big time. And he has figured that for China, oil is a
mm,
lifeline, right? So if you look at the
mm,
kind of and who are China's biggest oil suppliers,
mm, mm,
there are three of them. There's the
mm,
Russian Federation, there's Iran, and there's Venezuela. Now, all three of China's oil suppliers are under pressure, direct US.
mm,
Russia, of
mm,
course, in Ukraine, China, the Iran with the regime change that they've been talking about, and today Venezuela. So,
mm.
bigger game to this, what we are seeing unfolding here in South America. And let's not forget the Monroe Doctrine, which we
Yes.
thought we had forgotten about, which Trump has
Yes.
put again front and center. It's part of the US,
Mm, mm,
strategic doctrine, the
mm,
document that was released a few weeks back. So
mm,
it is a kind of a naked show of US realpolitik in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, Pranay.
mm. But before we go further on the geopolitics and the implication of this, this development, let us talk about the military aspect of it.
Yeah,
How do you see this operation as? There was already a force built-up in Caribbean. There is a
yes,
U.S. aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford there. Missile
yeah,
destroyers are there. U.S. Marines are there. There are reports that the same Delta Force carried out this operation. President
yeah.
Donald Trump, in an interview to Times, said that best of our people have carried out these operations. In your opinion, how this operation must have been planned and carried out? Because within few hours, seven, eight explosion, and
Yes.
the reports comes in that the president out of the country.
Right. Interesting question, Pranay. The fact is that I've been looking at the visuals and whatever I could make
Mm,
out on my
mm,
X feed, it
mm,
appears to be an intelligence-based special forces operation, right? You've seen a lot of these silhouettes of Black Hawks and Ghost Hawks and Apaches, and it's very clear that many of these helicopters belong to the
mm,
160th Special Operations Regiment, that's SOAR. They are
mm,
also called the Night Stalkers because
mhm,
they have the ability to operate very effectively at night. They specialize in night flying operations, and they are a
mm,
unit of the United States, a very elite unit, which
mm,
flies a number of machines like the Black Hawk, the Ghost Hawk as well. The Ghost Hawk is
mm,
the helicopter that was used in the Abbottabad raid in 2011.
mm,
So
mm,
they are the
mm,
guys, they're some of the best US pilots who fly
mm,
these machines, and
mm,
they carry some of the best US Special Forces operators,
mm,
whether it's Delta or SEAL Team 6. So the fact
mm,
that they've used a helicopter operation of this kind to insert commandos,
mm,
and they
mm,
obviously knew the precise location of where President Maduro
mm,
and his wife
mm,
were at a
mm.
particular time in
Since you mentioned about the
space.
helicopter, Sandeep, here, there are reports on social media that
Yeah.
people saw, Chinooks flying low
Yes.
in air and on the skies of in the skies of Caracas. So why the selection of Chinook as the preferable platform for this operation?
Well, the Chinook is a very versatile helicopter,
Mm,
Pranay. It's able to carry a large number of special forces operators. It can
mm,
carry something like 30, 40 fully loaded SF operators. It's got
mm,
mini guns. It's also equipped in a sense that.
mm,
So, what would have happened to my mind is that
mm,
there would have been a suppression of enemy air defenses raid where they would have basically hacked out
mm,
a corridor, an air corridor into Caracas. Uh,
mm,
where they would have destroyed all the air defense radars. They don't have to destroy
mm,
every single missile launcher because once you knock out the radars and the command and control systems, the air defenses are blind, right? So
mm,
the missiles will not know where to fire or lock on. So they would have just gone head on for the radars, um,
mm,
destroyed all the radars, created that corridor using
mm,
gunships and drones, and then through that corridor, they would have inserted these helicopters, special mission helicopters, Ghost Hawks, Black
mm,
Hawks, the Chinooks. They would have landed there, and it would have been a very quick operation. I don't see them being on the ground for more than a couple of minutes because every
mm,
minute that you stay on the ground, your chances of your operation going awry increase. So
Hmm.
they would have, rehearsed it very precisely. They would have created mock-ups of Maduro's palaces,
Hmm.
his hideouts, and all that in the United States. They would have practiced against those targets, and then they
Hmm.
would have just gone into Caracas and say they would have had a
Hmm.
library of targets. They would have practiced against a library of targets to say that the
Hmm.
presidential palace or his personal residence or a bunker
Hmm.
or a villa
Hmm.
or something like that. And they would have gone for say that okay, his target is believed to be in
But as you
location
mentioned,
Bravo.
Sandeep,
Yes,
in such operations, these are high-profile operations.
yes,
This need to be planned very precisely. But
yes,
I think U.S. had specific information about the whereabouts of Nicolas Maduro. They extracted him and his wife.
yes.
So there has to be some ground intelligence. There has to be some collaboration.
Absolutely. Now, this is the covert, this is where the
Yeah.
covert part comes in, Pranay. The fact is that you
Mm,
have people on the ground, and
mm,
I don't rule out the fact that there are people within Maduro's inner circle who would have
mm.
actually revealed his
Compromised.
location,
Mm,
would have said that, look, Maduro is going to be here at this time.
mm,
And that is precisely when they would have struck. Because if you look at it,
mm,
it doesn't look like the pictures of Maduro that have been released of him landing in the United States show him in pretty good shape. So it's a very clean operation. It doesn't seem to be having much of resistance. They would have landed there. They would have
mm,
headed precisely to where he and his wife were, picked
mm,
him up and flown him out of there. And within a matter
mm,
of hours. Now, there are very
mm,
few countries in the world today, Pranay, which
mm,
who have the ability to carry out something like this. I believe there are just two countries present.
mm.
It's the United States, of course, and the other is
In Israel.
there is because the kind of
Mm,
architecture that you need to have in place for carrying out operations like this are
mm,
of an order that only the US and Israel have brought. In fact, I would say
mm,
Israel is even better than the United States in certain aspects. Of
mm,
course, they wouldn't have the kind of resources that the US has, but on a smaller
mm.
level, they have displayed this in 50 years back. If you remember with Operation
Yes.
Jonathan, when they flew
Yes.
8,000 kilometers
Yes.
to and
Mm,
fro to Entebbe.
mm,
They rescued
mm,
all their hostages
mm,
that were taken, Israeli hostages, and they
mm,
brought them back. So this is
mm,
special forces mission of the highest orders. This is, I would say, this
mm,
is something only the Israelis could have pulled off, which the Americans seem
mm,
to have pulled off. I mean, we can
mm,
argue about the rules-based order,
mm,
whether it is actually legitimate. Can you go in and
mm, mm,
kidnap a legally, a lawfully elected president of a country like this and bring him
mm,
back like a common criminal? That's one debate, right?
mm, mm,
This is the end of the rules-based order. We've been talking
mm.
about this. The other
Yes.
is, of course, you have to give it to the Americans. This was a
Mm,
very, very
mm,
neatly,
mm,
precisely
mm,
executed surgical
mm,
operation of the kind that
mm,
only,
mm,
like I said, only one other country in the world
mm.
possibly could have done.
But let's talk something more about this very operation, Sandeep, because if you see the time span, the manner in which it was executed, the military base which is present
Yes,
around the presidential palace, for Tuna, it was targeted 7 to 8 explosions. What do
yes,
you make out of the pattern? The first, the explosion was heard, and
yes.
they precisely, how do you run this as, they neutralize the base or the response team which could have come in rescue of
Absolutely.
President
So
Maduro.
that is
Yeah.
exactly what had happened, and
Mm,
they chose midnight. It was a post-midnight attack. If you see
mm,
the attacks began what about 12
mm,
noon our time, Indian Standard
mm,
Time, which would be about 10 p.m. their time.
mm,
So they struck at a time post 10 p.m. When it's dark, of course. They
mm,
knew exactly what they were going for. Now, the thing is that the
mm,
Venezuelan forces on the ground don't know what's going on, right? They don't know
mm,
what the
mm,
plan is. The Americans know the plan. So they have a main
mm,
plan, which
mm,
was only about capturing Maduro and his wife and bringing them
mm,
out of the country and
mm,
possibly triggering a regime collapse. We don't know what
mm.
it would be a
The
multi-phase
subsequent, yeah,
plan. Yes.
exactly. Mm,
And then what you do is that you attack several targets
mm,
simultaneously. There is
mm,
a lot of confusion in the initial few hours where
mm,
the Venezuelan forces don't know what's going on and therefore they start running in various directions. There's
mm,
confusion, there's panic. You attack
mm,
arms depots, you attack airports, you attack this.
mm, mm,
So what happens is that they are distracted. They start
mm,
sending their forces out in different directions. And
mm,
just then, the main body of the special operators, which is, I would think it's Delta or SEAL Team 6, one of these
mm,
two chaps would have come in, flown into that precise location, neutralized the guards around the compound and taken Maduro
hmm,
and his wife out. So this is
hmm,
typically how
hmm,
special operations work. I mean,
hmm,
they're
hmm.
very focused, they're very precise,
Absolutely,
very
Sandeep.
surgical.
The most protected person on the Venezuelan soil has been
Yes,
extracted. This
yes.
actually, shows that the vulnerability of Venezuela as a state, out in
Yes.
open. Uh,
No,
but is
and the
it?
fact is
It's
that
yeah.
it
Hmm,
is they have the 160th SOAR
hmm,
was set up in 1980 after that
hmm,
disastrous operation called Eagle
hmm,
Claw in Iran.
hmm, hmm.
Coincidentally, we're just talking about Iran.
Yes.
They
Hmm,
had attempted to rescue the
hmm,
Iranian hostages,
hmm,
and they ended up destroying the entire commando force.
hmm,
It was one of the worst operations of its kind. Helicopters collided with
hmm,
tankers, and the Americans had to abandon everything and then run out. And
hmm,
this once they realized, they learned the lessons of that. They did the same thing here in Abbottabad 2011, where they lost one
hmm,
helicopter again. I mean, the operation
hmm,
was
hmm,
revealed. They had to reveal it
hmm,
because that one helicopter went down. But here it seems to be a clean operation. So you
hmm,
can say that the Americans have kind of exorcise the ghosts of Eagle Claw,
hmm,
the Black Hawk mission in
hmm,
Somalia in 1993, and to some extent the Abbottabad operation. And this is a
hmm,
very, very clean operation. They've gone in, they've pulled Maduro, his wife out, brought him, and he stands trial in the United States like a common criminal.
hmm. Do you think the government in Tehran must be the most worried right now
Oh,
because
absolutely. They would
hmm,
be very frightened of something like this happening to them. I mean, look at
hmm,
Ayatollah Khamenei. He would
hmm,
have possibly gone a couple of levels
hmm,
deep into his bunker, worried about such
hmm,
a scenario unfolding there. But I mean,
hmm, hmm.
Iran, the challenges are far different.
Far
It's
different.
not going to be as
Hmm,
easy for the United States to do something that they did over here. This is their backyard. I mean,
hmm,
uh,
hmm,
Venezuela is a country that's literally, again, to use that very cruel
hmm,
analogy, shooting fish in a barrel. Venezuela is surrounded on
hmm.
all sides by US bases, right? They have bases in
US
Puerto
bases,
Rico, and they
US
have, yeah,
allies, and in fact, for
allies.
long, Venezuela used to be US ally till about 1999.
Yes, that's right.
Only the Hugo Chavez-led Bolivian,
Chavez basically turned
revolution
it
changed
away
the course
from
of
the US,
yeah.
yes.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
it was,
But
I mean, they fly
hmm,
F-16s. The
hmm.
Venezuelan Air Force flies F-16s. That's how close they were to
Yes,
the US at one point. That the
absolutely,
front line,
absolutely.
only two countries in the
Hmm,
world, I remember, the first two countries to get the F-16s in the early 80s were
hmm, hmm,
Venezuela and Pakistan.
hmm,
That just showed how close,
hmm,
how useful they were to the Americans. Venezuela for
hmm,
its
hmm,
oil and Pakistan for its
hmm.
geopolitical location, of course.
So can we say that now the Venezuelan oil reserve, the largest oil reserve on the planet, are now, will be under US supervision? Can we say?
I think it's a little early to say that, Pranay,
Hmm,
but given how things are still
hmm,
unfolding, we don't know if
hmm,
the government of Venezuela, if it's just a regime change or if it's
hmm,
someone else has succeeded Maduro. He would obviously have had some plans in place. There is this
hmm,
person
hmm.
called Diosdado Cabello, who's his
Yes, the
deputy, the
Interior Affairs
enforcer.
Minister.
So
Hmm.
Cabello is the interior minister who's just come out with a
Yes,
video saying, "I'm around, I'm alive, I'm in charge," and
yes.
all of that. So
He has put out the
we
video where he was addressing with the troops and he's
yes,
out on
yes,
street and assuring people. But
yes,
that brings me to a question, Asandeep. If the leader has been extracted, but
yes,
the party, his supporters, his key henchmen, they are all around. In
yes,
fact, the Venezuelan forces are still taking dictation or the
yeah,
orders from the same set of people.
yeah.
Then how is it a regime change?
So yeah, good question, Pranay. And the fact is that
Hmm,
if it is you never know. This could be some
hmm,
kind of a trade-off, a bargain that they would have said, look, I need to get
hmm,
something to show a win.
hmm,
Possibly he falls short. There are various scenarios. We don't know what's going
hmm,
on right now. We're just guessing. The various
hmm.
scenarios are A, there is
Absolutely.
regime change. Maduro has been removed from there. There is a complete
Hmm,
collapse. Uh,
hmm,
and the US brings in a president of their choice, installs a
hmm, hmm,
pro-US government over there. That's clearly is not the case right now because it seems that,
hmm,
like you mentioned, the elements of the regime, the Maduro regime, are still in place, right?
hmm,
And it doesn't seem that. And if
hmm,
Maduro is being taken out, then it seems to be
hmm,
some kind of a compromise where while Maduro is
Hmm.
taken out for trial, his regime
Hmm.
kind of continues, right?
Hmm.
But it's far more amenable to the United States, and is willing to make a compromise with them. Who knows? Cabello could be the next president, or, so it's some kind of in geopolitics, it's not
Hmm.
always black and white. There's a lot of grays in
Hmm.
this. So right now we are in that gray zone. We don't know what's going on right now. It's too early to tell whether the US actually has now
Hmm.
control over the Venezuelan oil reserves, which,
Hmm.
if it does, if I mean, I'm
Hmm.
saying it with a big if the United
Hmm.
States does have control over Venezuela, the government and all that, that is
Hmm.
possibly one of the biggest geopolitical shifts of the 21st century. And then Trump is
Hmm.
going to have a huge win, because that is going
Hmm.
to reestablish his Monroe Doctrine, which he kind of
Hmm.
spoke about a few weeks back. And this puts the US in a driver's seat, especially at least in its
Hmm.
backyard, right? He's not so
Hmm.
worried about Taiwan. He's more worried about his backyard, focusing on countries like so-called rogue countries like Venezuela, which had, as you mentioned, had drifted away
Hmm.
from the U.S.
Hmm.
Sphere of influence. He's brought them back, and everyone's now going to fall in line, at least in his sphere of North and South America, in the Americas at
Hmm.
least. And
Hmm.
he's not so concerned about what happens to Ukraine, or maybe, God forbid, even with Taiwan. Who knows? There could
Hmm.
have been a deal cut with Xi Jinping.
Hmm.
There's a lot of speculation around that, because if you see the last delegation to meet Maduro was the Chinese
Hmm.
delegation. They met with him for a couple of hours, and they were with him.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
a lot of people are speculating that that is what gave his position away. And the fact is that this
Hmm.
must have been the opportunity the
Hmm.
Americans were waiting for, to do that snatch and grab mission, to grab Maduro and his wife.
Absolutely, very wide ramification of this development.
Yes,
The message has gone to various capitals, like in different forms. Be
yes.
it Beijing, be it Moscow, be it Tehran. Everyone can read, their own interpretation as far as this development is concerned. Thank you very much, Sandeep,
Thank you for
for
having me,
sharing your
Pranay.
perspective. Yeah, thank you very much.